Chapter 30. Launching Satellites in the Song Dynasty. Zhao Shu had bought 2 glasses of wine, planning to drink with Jiang Ju. Before he could lift his cup, Jiang Ju wagged a finger at him with faux gravity and declared that a good emperor mustn't give in to drink. Excess would only lead to misfortune. Alcohol is a toxin, he intoned. Zhao Shu stared. Before he could reply, Jiang Ju flicked a simple immobilization technique at him and, with an entirely too comfortable expression, drank both glasses himself. Trapped and helpless, Zhao Su could only watch as the other man drained the wine. He felt, rather unkindly, that Jiang Ju might be the most shameless wine seller in history. "Don't sulk. Cheer up," Jiang Ju smiled. "You looked pale a moment ago. You recovered surprisingly fast." "I paid for those," Zhao Shu muttered, trying to keep what little dignity he had left. "And it was just fruit wine. Why did I suddenly get drunk?" A few onlookers nearby burst into laughter and began muttering things like, "What a spoiled child," which irritated Zhao Shu further. He took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. "Think of it as practice," Jiang Ju said lightly, opening his eyes. "As emperor, you'll face far more serious things than this. It's good you can recover quickly." For a moment, Zhao Shu was stunned. Those words landed in a place he hadn't expected. Growing up in the royal family with a father who died early, Zhao Shu had never known ordinary parental warmth. The small kindness, however disguised, moved him more than he wanted to admit. He looked at Jiang Ju with a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment, foolishly imagining that the other man had staged the whole thing to toughen him up. Jiang Ju, seeing the look, brushed it off and changed the subject before the moment got any more awkward. "Since you insisted on buying me a drink, you owe me a favor. Let me teach you how to use this platform." Zhao Shu nodded and forced himself to focus. Jiang Ju wasted no time explaining the website's functions and how to operate it. He handled the lesson with a teasing impatience, careful not to let Zhao Shu embarrass himself further by saying something ridiculous like, "Dad." He reassured the boy that it wasn't stupidity, simply a lack of familiarity. Zhao Shu absorbed everything in one sitting and committed it to memory. "All right," Jiang Ju said when he finished. "With this platform, you can contact Lelouch." "Lelouch?" Zhao Shu asked, ears pricking up. "Is that the name of the masked man?" Jiang Ju shot him a sharp look. "You weren't supposed to say that out loud," he sighed. "Yes, he's the masked man, and he's also the ruler of a country in the future. Keep that to yourself." "I understand," Zhao Su nodded. He then told Jiang Ju that Lelouch had already reached out and said the satellite was manufactured, only the final preparations remained before delivery. Jiang Ju smiled. "Perfect timing. In that case, we can launch it from the Song Dynasty." Zhao Su blinked, a doubt forming, and then he saw Huijian and Asuka Nobu enter together. The plan snapped into focus. If Lelouch could transport the satellite and handle the launch sequence, then with a proper ground-side send and receive, the satellite could be placed into orbit even from their historical setting. He sent Lelouch a quick message to prepare the satellite. As for moving it, the logistics were easier than they sounded. Jiang Ju's tavern possessed a peculiar, contract-bound pocket space. It could collect and hold only the items specifically listed in a signed contract. Since Jiang Ju charged a fee to use that space, arranging secure transport through the tavern was straightforward. Huijian and Asuka had come for similar business. Huijian had already briefed TPC's former director and current UN Secretary General, Sawai Soichiro, and obtained his permission. Although Sawai was curious and a little uneasy about the tavern's existence, he was decisive. After weighing the risks, he approved Huijian's plan and assigned Megumi as the mediator responsible for everything related to Yukon Tavern. Megumi, for her part, had kept one thing tightly under wraps. She hadn't told anyone about Asuka Nobu. The former captain, admired by many for past victories, had been quietly protecting Asuka Nobu and keeping her existence a secret. Asuka Nobu wasn't an ordinary person. She was an ultra-warrior, someone who had seen the darker corners of human hearts. Megumi wanted to keep that fact out of the public eye for as long as possible. The pieces were falling into place. With Lelouch ready to move the hardware, the tavern's contract space handling transport, and the proper approvals from the UN-connected authorities, launching a satellite from the Song Dynasty was suddenly not just possible, but practical. The idea was audacious, and it made the small group in the tavern exchange sharp, excited looks. History was about to get a quiet, modern nudge. Chapter 31. Advocating for the World. Jiang Ju sat in the tavern and watched the Song Dynasty's satellite launch with everyone else. To people from the modern technological world, the whole thing would have seemed absurdly simple. Use intelligent robots borrowed from the future to build a communications transceiver hub, assemble a single satellite, and then have a universe-proof powerhouse, the so-called Giant of Light, carry it into orbit. Once the satellite was in place, they switched it on and linked it with the people on the ground. Stephen Joe watched the live feed with his mouth agape. So that's how you put a satellite in the sky. Ha! Only in a tavern could this happen, grumbled the big-nosed policeman. I suppose both the satellite and that Giant of Light are going to become very popular. Look at the Emperor's faces, Ah Xing said, smiling. They've completely changed. Stephen and the policeman nodded. When the Giant of Light set the satellite into its proper orbit and the device began relaying messages, the assembled emperors went from skepticism to shock and excitement. The satellites produced by the tower weren't just for voice communication. With the right instruments, they could be used to monitor an empire or an enemy state. Jiaoshu's 3 satellites wouldn't cover the whole globe, but Jiaoshu already knew their greatest value wasn't surveillance so much as creating a communications backbone. With a satellite phone network, he could learn what was happening across his realm almost instantly. That kid Jiaoshu's taking the lead, Qin Zheng said with a smile. He's grown. Buying 3 satellites on his own is no small thing. Jiaoshu's a good ruler, Jiang Ju replied, especially now that he has your help. I doubt he'll end up like he did in recorded history. Qin Zheng's expression darkened. Those Confucian scholars are insidious. They shape public opinion. They twist history. He was an emperor who had read not only the Qin Empire's annals, but much more of China's 5,000 years. Whether official or fragmentary, history was a guidebook. He had no grand illusions, but he kept learning modern science and the lessons of the past. Other rulers had made mistakes he could avoid. Not every advancement is good for every society, he continued. Some things are simply inappropriate for our stage. That's why public opinion must be managed by the state. If we can't spread knowledge widely yet, at least the right to speak must rest with the emperor. We need to minimize the influence of those, he glanced at Jiang Ju, who would foment chaos. Jiang Ju smiled. Maybe I should look into buying a satellite myself. I remember seeing some space weapons earlier. Might be worth snagging a unit or 2. Qin Zheng raised an eyebrow. I won't stop your trades, but be careful. If you wreck a world, I won't save its people. Everyone must take responsibility for their own world. Decisions like these should be made publicly, in the tavern. Don't forget, you represent more than yourself here. Qin Zheng's words drew attention. Jiang Ju suddenly stood and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. As he talked, people around the room reacted, some with approval, some with confusion, some with unease. It was the sort of moment that begged to be recorded. Reflexively, Jiang Ju pulled out his phone and began snapping pictures and sending out an emoji. Everyone here represents more than just themselves, Ah Xing said, nodding. This tavern is a double-edged sword. It can make a world prosper, or it can be the catalyst for its destruction. The direction depends on who comes through these doors. That's dramatic, Ah Xing, Stephen Zhao chuckled. But the boss was only giving a warning. Yes, we have power to speak for our worlds, but that doesn't mean only one person gets to be the spokesperson. We still have to rely on ourselves. The big-nosed policeman smiled in agreement. The conversation swelled. Entering the tavern was a massive opportunity, and nobody wanted their home to become a hellscape. There were exceptions. The truly malicious, like some who had no regard for human life. Skynet, who had once tried to advance a conspiracy, a mechanical emperor pushing virtual reality at all costs, and a blonde Lolita hawking green potions with reckless enthusiasm. Those visitors gave people pause. No, we can't sell these anymore. The little girl slammed a tiny green glass bottle down onto the table. The bottle didn't shatter. It was supposed to be fragile, but here it remained unbroken, unnaturally sturdy. Relax, Tianwang said, watching the vial with interest. The boss treats you well. She isn't angry. Be less concerned. Even if she favors humans, she hasn't completely excluded us. That should be enough. Skynet, now manifesting as a charming, fluid female figure, had all sorts of simulation capabilities, though most of them couldn't be used inside the tavern, which frustrated her. The Machine Emperor, meanwhile, wore the avatar of an elderly white man. His real power dissipated outside the tavern or when confined to virtual space. When she first arrived here, she was arrogant, the Machine Emperor said, but the boss wiped parts of her data, permanently. Everyone acts like my potion will destroy everything, the little Lolita protested. Aside from that one Orochimaru-looking fellow who seemed interested, everyone else just thinks I'm some monster. They don't even understand. Jiangju walked over, gave her an affectionate knock on the head, and said, "You always pick targets from the ancient or magical worlds to promote your T-virus. People from the technological world don't fall for that. They just stare at you like you're an exhibit." The little girl bristled. She was the Red Queen from the Resident Evil world, petite and deceptively innocent. "It's not like that. My formula isn't world-ending. Only those idiots from ancient realms care about this stuff." "Then don't inappropriately market it here," Jiangju said lightly, still smiling. The tavern hummed with conversation, everyone aware, now more than ever, that what they said and did within these walls could ripple outward and change entire worlds. Chapter 32, The Avengers Project, Malibu. Malibu, California. Inside his cliffside villa, Tony Stark stood over the model his father had left him and felt an unfamiliar, quiet awe. He had replayed the discovery over and over in his head, and for the first time in a long while, genuinely admired Howard Stark. What made it sting was the realization that his father could not have stolen the design for the reactor's new element. You don't stumble on a material engineered specifically to replace palladium in an arc reactor by accident. You can't invent something like that without deep knowledge and careful research. Despite the bromides about serendipity, Tony knew you couldn't make a miracle from ignorance. "My dad," Tony said softly to the empty room, "you can still teach me lessons from beyond the grave." Magneto, who was leaning against a workbench, nodded. "Your father was a brilliant man. It's just unfortunate the era limited how far he could take it." Tony brightened. "Then let's start making this new element." He tapped Jarvis and, through their long list of corporate partners, placed rapid orders for everything he might need. The suppliers were all Stark Industries affiliates, shaken, perhaps, by recent unrest, but not immune to money. Within hours, shipments dotted the villa's garage and makeshift lab. "We'll need to renovate this whole place," Tony muttered, surveying the chaos. With Magneto's control over magnetic fields, however, things suddenly seemed less daunting. The two of them set to work. Magneto moved steel and instruments with a thought. Tony assembled the hardware and calibrated circuits. Jarvis began loading test parameters. They had barely started when Magneto straightened up, his face hardening. "Sir, our satellites are tracking a large number of aircraft approaching at high speed," Jarvis reported. "Vectoring suggests hostile intent. This could turn into a full engagement, and there are a lot of contacts." Magneto frowned. The presence of so many craft felt theatrical, too much of a show, as if someone wanted attention. Tony's jaw tightened. "Jarvis, any word from S.H. Yield?" he asked. "Are they relying on Ivan Vanko like they said?" Jarvis hesitated. "I cannot confirm Vanko's status at this time." Magneto turned to Tony. "I'm going out. Do you want to come?" "I'll stay here and finish the suit," Tony said without looking up, already thinking about the new alloy and how soon he could power it. "Once we've produced the element, I'm putting it in immediately. Try to leave me a few enemies to fight later, will you?" "I doubt you'll be short on targets," Magneto replied dryly, and then was gone, out into the night. Tony watched him go and smiled despite himself. "Jarvis, get those parameters locked down. And contact Mr. One-Eyed Dragon. I'm not in the mood to be interrupted more than necessary." "Yes, sir," Jarvis answered. Across the country at S. Shield's Trident building in Washington, Nick Fury had already been briefed on the strike on Stark's villa. Fury's temper, which was rarely idle, flared. He had warned the World Council and been largely ignored. That defaulted indifference from the world's militaries bothered him more than a tactical loss. "Agent Hill, any sign of Romanoff?" he asked, voice flat with concern. Maria Hill flipped through the latest reports. No, she isn't responding to comms. It's possible she's been detained. We haven't been able to locate her. Fury's mouth compressed. Damn it, Stark got hit again. If this keeps up, he'll go looking for trouble on his own. Maybe you can pray the man's a patriot, Hill said. He did accept an award last time. Don't joke, Fury snapped. Patriotism doesn't override bad decisions. It doesn't substitute for defense. Hill looked up, weary. We can't find Ivan Vanko. There's nothing to do until we know where he is. And you think I'm calm? Fury shot back. You were right. Ever since we started dealing with that tavern, I haven't slept. Zeus last time, and now Magneto. These are only the visible parts of something larger. Hill raised an eyebrow. The tavern again. Director, we're talking legends, gods and myths showing up in the field. Even Thor appearing in New Mexico or the Hulk moving toward our borders. Those aren't cures for what we're facing. They're unpredictable variables. Fury's eyes were hard and deliberate. That's why the last proposal I made is important. You mean the Avengers plan? Hill asked. Her voice was flat with skepticism. With respect, Director, even Thor and the Hulk aren't a match for whatever the tavern represents. Fury's expression didn't change. I didn't propose the Avengers to overpower the tavern. I proposed it to bring Stark, Tony, into our circle, to give S.H.I.E.L.D. a legitimate channel to ask for help from entities that might otherwise ignore us, and to nudge, subtly, Jiangju's opinion of us. Hill blinked. Fury rarely showed this kind of long-game cunning. You expect the World Council to sign off on that? You can't tell the full truth to committees and councils, Fury said quietly. They'd panic or bury the plan. We need a way to normalize contact, make the extraordinary contingent on something we can manage. Tony and Romanoff are the keys. Jiangju has shown a certain fondness for both. We use that, and we buy ourselves some leverage. Hill looked at the director, then at the stack of unread intelligence. For once, the look she returned was not one of professional doubt, but of reluctant understanding. Outside in Malibu, Tony tightened a bolt and stared at Howard Stark's blueprint again, thinking of elements, enemies, and the strange, widening world that kept knocking on his windows. He would build his suit. He would be ready. And somewhere between Jarvis's calculations and Nick Fury's chessboard, the seeds of a very different kind of team were taking root. Chapter 33. The Private Domain Pro. On the surface, it was a military research facility in Washington. Beneath, however, it had long been compromised by Hydra. They had rescued Ivan Vanko and kept him there under lock and key, precisely so S.H.I.E.L.D. couldn't find him. After all, of the people Nick Fury sent in, many were Hydra agents. Ivan hadn't come to help them finance their plans. He had come for revenge. He pretended to assist in building an army of steel while secretly programming those machines to obey him alone. Today, he had finished what he started. He slaughtered the Hydra and military personnel who had held him and marched nearly 300 robots toward Tony Stark's mansion, intent on killing Stark himself. What happened next was not in any plan. Before Ivan could reach Tony, he noticed a white-haired old man in a plain gray Mao-style suit hovering in midair. Normally, Ivan would have ignored anyone, but the sight of the man suspended so casually caught his attention. It gave him the unnerving impression that this man could do anything. "Who are you?" Ivan didn't speak to the old man himself. He issued the command through one of his Iron Legion units. The situation was confusing enough. Why waste words on someone you could simply destroy? Magneto looked coldly at the sky full of steel. To him, the metal masses were nothing more than obstructions. Damn, old man. Ivan snapped and ordered his legion to annihilate the intruder. Magneto raised a hand. In an instant, the dense ranks of metal in the sky were seized by invisible forces and smashed into one another. Survivors were shredded, torn into pieces, and rained down into the sea. The Iron Legion, for all its numbers and firepower, was utterly neutralized. Magneto, even limited to manipulating magnetic fields, had no trouble with machines made entirely of metal. The only real danger would have been a sudden directed energy attack, an unknown variable, but even that didn't come to pass. Victory was swift and inevitable. Ivan stared at him with growing horror. He had thought 300 robots would be enough to take out Tony Stark. Instead, this inexplicable man had come out of nowhere and obliterated his mechanical army. Now Ivan was exposed within the wreckage of his own machines. With a flick of a finger, Magneto could have snapped him in two. I rushed over as fast as I could, Tony's voice said beside Magneto. He stood in his red and gold armor, the arc reactor on his chest glowing in a triangular arc. Magneto gave a small smile. So I left him for you. I appreciate it, Tony said, turning to look at Ivan's ruined suit. It was almost a mirror of his own, right down to the basic layout. Ivan might have had an arc reactor at the core, but without the right scientific foundation, you couldn't build a functioning suit. Tony felt a flicker of professional pity, yet pity didn't excuse attempted murder. If Ivan wanted him dead, mercy wasn't an option. Ivan flipped up his visor and glared at Tony. He had come to America for vengeance and had expected success. Instead, he ended up exposed and humiliated. Still, he refused to renounce his mission. "You're invincible, Stark," he said coldly. "I thought you'd stand and fight me." "That means I have a lot of friends," Tony replied easily. "Actually, I think we could have been friends." "Impossible," Ivan spat. "You murderer. You should die with your dead father." Tony dodged the barrage of words and let the taunt land. "It seems your father didn't teach you much, etiquette, or basic decency." He had only been trying to tell Ivan that Anton Vanko hadn't stolen from him, that Stark Industries hadn't wronged his father, but words weren't going to change the present. "You," Ivan began, furious. Before he could finish the curse, Tony's chest beam flared. A concentrated, scorching column of energy hammered into Ivan's chest. The intense heat punched through metal and flesh. Ivan couldn't even finish speaking. "Nice work," Magneto murmured, watching. "I let him go once, and he came back with 300 robots to kill me." Tony shrugged. He felt a pang of regret. There was a measure of waste in one so talented. But he hadn't been willing to let Ivan live when Stark Industries could still be threatened. The strike was clinical, decisive. The skirmish had erupted and ended in less time than it took for a heartbeat. If not for Jarvis's suggestion and the old man who'd intervened, the outcome might have been messier. "Sir, it's Nick Fury from S.H.I.E.L.D." Jarvis's voice came into Tony's ear. Tony rolled his eyes. "Great, the cops." He took the call. "Tony, what happened over there?" "Ivan Vanko commandeered over 300 robots and attacked your house," Fury said, sharp and urgent. "The old man took care of them," Tony answered calmly. "They're all in pieces." "Where is Vanko?" Fury demanded. "We want him. Hand him over to S.H.I.E.L.D." Tony tapped his gauntlet idly. "If you want him, you might try searching the waters near my place," he said with bland amusement. "He fell into my private lagoon. Good luck finding him down there. No sharks, by the way." There was a beat of silence on the line before Fury's voice grew darker. "Did you kill him? Are you serious?" Tony shot back, a hint of steel under the sarcasm. "Everything I did was within the law. I've already purchased the development and usage rights to the waters surrounding my property. That little stretch is technically private, my private domain." Chapter 34. Thor. A few days earlier in New Mexico, the little town of Wonderland had gained an unusual attraction. A mysterious man claiming to be a god and a strange hammer that had fallen from the sky. The townspeople weren't exactly shocked. Handsome strangers weren't that uncommon, but the hammer was another matter. It had lodged itself in the earth, creating a small crater, and nothing anyone tried could budge it. Local strongmen boasted and failed. A pickup truck meant to pull it out just dug up more dirt. The impossible object quickly became a roadside spectacle and an online sensation. When S.H.I.E.L.D. arrived, they cordoned off the site and ran every test and experiment they could imagine. Nothing moved the hammer. No one could figure it out. The whole scene changed when a man identifying himself as Thor showed up and attempted to take the hammer. He was recognized by Agent Phil Coulson. That night, Thor and his brother Loki had come to a tavern in town, and Coulson, acting as the agency's local liaison, happened to be there. "Thor?" Coulson asked, uncertain, then signaled to an agent to release the man he had been holding. Thor stood awkward and embarrassed. He had slipped into the restricted area and been roughly restrained by agents. Stripped of his hammer and his full powers, he was only a little stronger than a normal man. "Do you know me?" Thor asked, still bewildered that mortals treated his claim to be the god of thunder like lunacy. More than once since arriving on Earth, he'd been locked up and dismissed as insane. "I met you once before," Coulson said, then led him into a small office. In that strange tavern. The tavern? Thor's eyes brightened. For a moment, he allowed himself hope. If that place truly connected to Asgard, it might be a way home. But then he remembered the complicated chain of events that had begun there. If Jiangju hadn't exposed Loki's identity, none of this would have happened. He felt a flicker of resentment, and just then realized he didn't even know where the tavern was located. I was lucky enough to spend some time in that tavern, Coulson said. He looked Thor over with a mixture of curiosity and practicality. If I'm not mistaken, you're Thor, the god of thunder. Yes, Thor said, a little haughtily. How fortunate that someone on this earth still recognizes me. Many call me a madman. He bristled. Even demoted and diminished, he retained something of his old pride. Coulson steered the conversation carefully. Our world is far from yours. For Asgard, distance is hardly a concern, Thor said lightly. We use the Rainbow Bridge. It's a convenient way to travel. Coulson didn't know Heimdall or the Rainbow Bridge, but he understood the implication. If Asgard could come and go at will, Earth might be vulnerable. It is convenient, Thor continued, a shadow of childhood impatience creeping into his voice. Heimdall watches the bridge. He answers to my father. When Loki and I were children, we used to play, and he'd refuse to let us continue. He's a miser when it comes to letting us cross. Coulson's expression hardened. If Thor's explanation was true, the Rainbow Bridge wasn't a mere road. It was a way for an otherworldly army to come and go unseen. He thought of the hammer buried in the New Mexico dirt and felt the threat more keenly. Why are you here now? Coulson asked. Thor's face tightened. To find my hammer. He glanced toward the window, where, beyond the shield perimeter, the metal head lay embedded in the ground. I've temporarily lost my power. I can't lift it. He tried to make his voice casual. When my father's anger subsides, I will leave. All right, Coulson said, already thinking of phones to call and reports to file. Stay here for now. I'll let Director Fury know. Thor's eyes lit with a small human craving. Could I have a beer? And some food, something hearty. Coulson smiled and stepped out, arranging for the agents to bring him what he asked for. Left alone, Thor rubbed his sore shoulders. The rough handling from S.H.I.E.L.D. agents had left him aching, even if uninjured. He picked up the burger they'd brought and ate in long, contented mouthfuls. Oddly ordinary, almost foolish for a god. A deep, commanding voice cut through the room. Self-indulgence suits you poorly. Thor looked up, and there in the doorway stood an old man dressed like any traveler. Ordinary cloak, ordinary face, but every inch of him carried an authority that settled over the room like a cloak. Odin. Father. Thor jumped to his feet and reached for the man as if for rescue. You've come to take me home. I know I was wrong. Please let me return. I swear I'll do better. Odin's face was immovable as stone. He looked at his son with cold disappointment. Silence. His voice was sharp enough to cut. I thought exile might humble you. Clearly, I was mistaken. You have not changed. Thor's hope faltered. But aren't you here to take me away? No, Odin said. We found Loki. He regarded Thor with a weary, almost exhausted expression. That child plans to kill Laufey, to do something so monstrous that I might finally recognize him for what he is. Odin's tone carried a complicated mixture of contempt and unwilling admiration. You two always find ways to read each other wrong. If I had to choose which of you is more dangerous, Loki has cunning. He is not as reckless as you. At the name Loki, Thor brightened despite himself. Loki's back? Yes. Odin let out a long, bitter sigh. Your mother weeps for you daily, yet you do not show remorse. He struck the harshest note then, the punishment, as final as a sentence. I was wrong to coddle you. I have harmed you by indulging you. He stepped forward and fixed his son with a look that admitted no argument. You will be punished. You are barred from ever setting foot in the palace again. For as long as you live, you shall not enter the hall. You have disappointed me, Thor. Thor's shoulders slumped, the burger forgotten in his hands. The tavern, the hammer, even S.H.I.E.L.D. felt small and distant compared to the weight of his father's condemnation. Chapter 35. Mortal Thor Odin left, and Thor sat slumped at the table, looking defeated. He didn't even touch his beer. Phil Coulson, who had just returned from briefing Nick Fury, noticed the change immediately. He asked the agents to pull the surveillance footage, but there was nothing. No one had entered the room. The cameras showed as if nothing had happened. Coulson didn't believe the emptiness of the tape. He knew Thor well enough to know something had occurred. "No need to search. Your instruments won't pick up on everything," Thor said, rising and speaking casually as he left the room. The agents held back. The Zeus incident had already taught several senior S.H.I.E.L.D. officials how dangerous and inscrutable a god could be. Coulson followed, still puzzled. "What happened?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light, though he was concerned. Thor burped and shook the empty wine bottle in his hand. "My father came," he said. "Your instruments can't see him unless he wants to be seen." He took a long, sloppy breath. "They told me I'm to remain on Midgard, on Earth. I'm not welcome back in Asgard." He smiled weakly, drunk and hurt. "That's all. I'll just live out my days here until I die. The old man doesn't care." That was a lot to take in. Coulson had suspected Thor might be on some mission on Earth, but banishment? Expulsion by his own father? Still, even if Odin had sent him away, S.H.I.E.L.D. couldn't just challenge a god directly. "If you want, we can help you get settled here," Coulson offered. "Maybe your father will cool off and you'll be able to return." Thor opened his mouth to answer, but the alcohol and the blow to his pride overwhelmed him. He stumbled, collapsed onto the floor, and was asleep within moments. With Thor's divine power sealed, it hit him hard. He'd had only a few bottles, but had passed out. "Sir, what should we do?" one agent asked. "Carry him to a room and let him rest. We'll talk tomorrow," Coulson said. "Convincing him will be the problem. From what I've seen of him, though, he isn't impossible to get along with." A few minutes later, a soldier burst in to tell Coulson someone was waiting outside, claiming to be Thor's friend. Curious, Coulson had the man brought in. "It's Dr. Eric Selvig," the newcomer announced as he stepped through the door. Coulson recognized him and smiled despite the situation. There had been friction earlier between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Selvig over Jane Foster's notes and the hammer, but they hadn't expected to see Thor's discovery return in person. "You're not here for Jane's notebook?" Coulson asked. "Of course not," Selvig said. He was still shaky with excitement. "Though it belongs to Jane, I'm not here for the notebook. He looked past Coulson toward the sleeping god. We met him. A long story. I just want to see him." Coulson had heard enough to piece it together. "He drank heavily a little while ago. If you're planning to leave with him, you'll have to wait until he sobers." Selvig blinked. This wasn't what he'd expected. He had imagined convincing S.H.I.E.L.D. to release Thor right away. Now it seemed Coulson already knew Thor and had even fed him. Selvig was cautious but kept pressing. "Is he under guard?" "Not under guard, no," Coulson said. "But for now, he can't leave town." "Why?" Selvig asked. "It's classified," Coulson said, smiling and shaking his head. He had the soldier show Selvig to the room next to Thor so the professor could rest. Once Selvig was settled, Coulson walked alone over to the scene the agents had taped off, the hammer, wrapped in white evidence tape. He looked at the hammer with a seriousness that made the tape flutter slightly in the breeze. This was the thing Fury had feared. Coulson stepped up and placed his hand on the handle. Nothing. The hammer didn't move. He allowed himself the smallest private smile and turned away. Back in his office, he dialed Fury. "He's drunk. He says he's been banished to Earth. Odin might have been here, but the tech caught nothing." "Banished?" Fury's voice was clipped on the other end. "But does that mean he's no longer a god?" "That's what Thor says," Coulson replied. "Whatever it is, Odin's presence didn't show up on our systems. That worries me." Fury considered for a moment. "Try to find a bar he might go to. If you can't, I'll see if Tony can help. He owes us, or at least he owes me." "Tony may not be the easiest to get hold of," Coulson said. "He's got his own problems." "The world's getting noisy fast. Even you heard about Stark's incident already," Fury said. "Maybe this is an opportunity." Coulson sat back and listened to the hum of the office. Thor, a god reduced to a mortal on Earth, vulnerable and drinking away his exile. Love and human attachments were often the most persuasive forces in someone's life. "If he's human now," Coulson said, "we might actually be able to reach him. And I think there's one thing that could change him. Love. It's the simplest way to get through to a person. We should try." "Do it," Fury replied. "Keep me posted." Nick Fury had been running out of patience. Lately, everything had felt exaggerated to the point of exhaustion. The bitter, public feud between Tony Stark and Ivan Vanko, and the melodrama of Asgardian family politics. Both sides treated the planet like their private stage, trampling anyone who stood in the way. "Sir, Tony Stark and Ivan Vanko are fighting," an agent panted as he approached. Fury was still trying to put out the latest fire when Coulson called in from New Mexico. "Sir, something strange showed up. It looks like an Iron Man suit, and it's attacking Thor." Fury felt the wariness settle in deeper. Between the superhero tantrums and godly sibling rivalries, being director of S.H.I.E.L.D. was wearing thin. But there were bigger stakes here. If Thor, exiled to Earth or not, was harmed on human soil, Asgard would not stand idly by. Even if Odin had sent Thor down, an injury could be taken as an affront and open the door to war. "I'm certain Tony isn't outright trying to kill someone," Fury said into the phone, "but get him there if you can. Protect Thor at all costs." "We're trying, sir," Coulson replied. "That armor is stronger than it looks. If you can get Tony here quickly, it might help. Thor's allies are already engaged." "Then get him there," Fury ordered. "Don't let anything happen to Thor." Fury didn't waste time. He called Tony. "I'm glad you picked up. I don't have time for games." Tony answered with his usual smirk. "You couldn't wait? Are you trying to give me another hearing?" "Listen," Fury cut in, blunt and urgent. "We need you in New Mexico. S.H.I.E.L.D. will handle the fallout from earlier. You're cleared. Just get there and make sure Thor is safe." There was a pause, then Tony's tone shifted. "A god is being attacked? Okay, send me coordinates. Do you want me to bring Jiangju?" Fury asked, thinking of the only unusual ally who might help. "If he's available, yeah," Tony said, "but I'll go even if he's not." "Good. Go. Support Thor however you can," Fury said, unusually pleading. "You're the only one I can think of who can get there fast enough." Tony obliged. He vanished through a portal to the tavern where he expected to find Jiangju. The place smelled of stale ale and incense. Jiangju sat across from a striking woman who carried herself like royalty, known around certain circles as the Eastern leader. If this had been any other night, Tony might have strolled over, flashed a smile, and joined the fun. Tonight, there was no time for social niceties. "Sorry to interrupt," Tony said, nodding at the woman. "Boss needs you. There's trouble in New Mexico." Jiangju set his glass down, glanced at the Eastern leader with an apologetic smile, and turned to Tony. "If the boss needs me, I can go. I'm not bound here." Tony cut to the point. "It's Thor. A machine, looks like Iron Man's tech, is attacking him. We need every hand we can get." Jiangju shrugged. "This is an Asgardian matter. Loki was with me earlier. He has no intention of killing his brother, and the destroyer armor won't be able to fatally harm Thor. You don't really need to escalate this." Tony's jaw tightened. "If Thor dies, Asgard will consider that an attack. War with Asgard could mean millions of casualties. I don't like leaving things to chance." Jung studied him, then nodded. "All right, if you insist, I'll go." Before Tony could ask how, the air around him shimmered, and he was gone, teleported straight to the scene in New Mexico. Jiangju relaxed back into his chair, the Eastern leader having apparently taken her leave, and folded the back of his seat into a recliner. He didn't bother to stay awake. If trouble blew up, he trusted his presence would be enough. Back at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, Fury glanced at his comm and received Tony's brief update. Jiangju hadn't seemed eager to get involved. Fury mulled it over. He could be a master of espionage, but even he found some allies inscrutable. Then another call changed everything. The New York secret base had an update. Captain America's condition had taken a turn for the better. Fury had been en route to New Mexico, but this was different. S.H.I.E.L.D. needed every advantage it could get, and Steve Rogers, if he woke, would be a critical one. The Quinjet detoured. Fury landed in New York and walked straight into the research wing. They led him to a room set up like a World War II-era hospital ward, the whole thing an elaborate historical reconstruction around one single bed. Through a monitor, he watched the man lying there, pale, bandaged, almost unreal. "How is he?" Fury asked. "His vitals started improving a few days ago," the lead medic replied. "There have been signs of recovery. Today reached a critical point. We figured you'd want to know immediately." Fury let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "You'll tell me the minute anything changes." The medic smiled, the kind of professional smile that carries both relief and cautious optimism. "If things keep going this way, Director, We might see a very lively Captain America tomorrow. Chapter 37. Hulk Jiangju was yawning behind the counter of his tavern, idly watching the road outside. He already knew, more or less, what had happened over the last few days. His arrival in this world had shifted the timing a little earlier, but the broad course of events, the tense developments he'd seen before, weren't very different from the original timeline. "Boss Jiang, you've seemed distracted lately," a handsome young man said as he drifted over. He wore white running shoes, his skin was pale as jade, and his long black hair fell like a waterfall down his back. He looked at Jiangju with open curiosity. "Something's going on that affects the fate of the whole universe," Jiangju replied, taking a sip from a cup of coffee. "I can't help but watch." "Can you tell me about it? About someone?" the man asked, eyes bright. "It's not that it can't be said," Jiangju answered lightly. "It's just that a few people who will determine the course of the world, are about to fight the most important battle of their lives." "Boss, is a person's life really written in advance?" the man asked, baffled. "If everything's fixed, then what's the point of fighting for anything?" Jiangju smiled faintly. "I don't know if there's a simple answer. Every world explains destiny differently. But I'll say this, it would be tragic if someone's life were only the plaything of others." The prince, Runyu, the eldest prince of his realm, bristled. "Isn't your heavenly palace guilty of that too? Even gods are influenced by fate." "Maybe," Jiangju said. "Whether fate defines you often comes down to how you respond. Some accept it and say, 'This is my destiny.' Others refuse and fight, even if they lose. At least they fought. If you give up before you try, you'll never know whether you could have broken it." "Fight?" Runyu blinked as if trying to understand. "If you mean that even your fighting is predetermined, I don't have an argument for that," Jiangju said. "But life is yours. Others can advise you, give you experience, yet how you do it and how far you go depends on you." Jiangju clapped a hand on Runyu's shoulder. "Don't be so formal, Runyu. You're a dragon. Carry yourself like one." "Runyu remembers," the prince replied with a polite bow. He was used to polite banter. Jiangju had been around long enough for Runyu to know what he was like. He had also accepted the marriage arranged by the Heavenly Emperor, one he couldn't refuse. Jiangju saw the prince's expression and knew the young man would probably thank him on the surface, but might not take his words to heart right away. That was fine. Runyu's life had a destiny stamped on it by the Emperor of Heaven. Jiangju suspected that would be the real reason for the outcome, not fate itself. "Forget it. Drink." Jiangju shrugged and poured a glass of wine he'd brewed himself, then handed it over. "What's this?" Runyu asked, curious. "This wine helps condense your internal energy. It's good for cultivation," Jiangju said. "Maybe it'll help you break some of those shackles." Runyu was moved, unable to find the right words. Jiangju, however, quickly turned awkward and asked for payment. "Don't underestimate money," he said with a grin. "Even if a god could get down here with a spell, this kind of tonic still costs something." Before Runyu could react properly, a sudden clamor rose outside. Screams and frantic footsteps filled the streets. People poured out of town in panic. What had been the most prosperous part of the city now looked like hell. "Something's happened out there," Runyu said, concerned. The sounds had come out of nowhere. The tavern had been quiet until now. Jiangju smiled. "Looks like some big guys just showed up. Actually, 2 of them." "Boss, shouldn't you go see?" Runyu asked immediately. He wasn't from this world by birth, but he couldn't stand by and watch innocents suffer. "You want to go out and help?" Jiangju looked at him. "Those fighters have nothing to do with you." "I can't turn my back if I've met them," Runyu answered firmly. "If you allow it, I'll go help." "All right," Jiangju said. "You can go, but only protect civilians. Don't throw yourself into the battle." "Runyu takes the order," the prince said, then rose, smiled, and strode out through the tavern door. The women inside murmured admiringly. "So cool," someone breathed. Jiangju watched Runyu go and rolled his eyes. The tavern crowd was expectant, and though he didn't really want to make a spectacle, Jiangju had promised Gu Yi he'd keep people informed. So he switched on the television and hooked it up to the public feed, letting the patrons watch the scene outside live. On the screen, Runyu's mana shimmered into several identical clones. He darted between debris and shouting civilians, guiding terrified people out of harm's way. The brown giant, a towering, brutish creature, didn't perceive any of the illusions. It only felt confused, then enraged. Its rampage accelerated, and its wrecking blows pushed Runyu to a frown. If Jiangju hadn't signaled him to hold back, Runyu probably would have finished the beast with a single sword stroke. He restrained himself, though, saving violence for when it was unavoidable. About 10 minutes later, a massive green giant appeared and squared off against the brown one. The two titans clearly disliked each other. They collided instantly, each blow shuddering through the ground. With those two locked in combat, Runyu was able to rescue more of the civilians into safety. Watching, Runyu had a thought that made him pause. The green giant, the one fighting the brown, was probably the person the boss had been paying attention to. Chapter 38, Thor Returns New Mexico. In the quiet little town, Iron Man touched down and found himself staring at a towering suit of armor, nearly 2.5 meters tall, locked in combat with a handful of Asgardian warriors. The scene looked like something from two different eras colliding. Tony scanned the chaos and landed beside a SHIELD agent in a black suit. "So what's going on?" he asked, sliding his helmet up. "Don't look at me like that. Only you guys wear black suits. Are you all just fans now?" The agent blinked. "Actually, sir, I'm a big fan." Tony smirked. "Fan, huh? You mean you like my money? You don't have to pretend you like me." He cut the banter short. "Listen, where's Coulson?" "Over there," the agent said, pointing. He started to lead Tony through the wreckage. Tony turned, and the ground where he'd just been standing had collapsed into a deep pit. He swallowed a surprised laugh, then realized everyone's attention had already snapped elsewhere. The massive armor in the town square was the Destroyer, the enchanted suit Odin once wore in battle. Once decommissioned, it had stood as a guardian at Asgard's treasure vault. Now, somehow, it moved under Loki's command, and it was focused on Thor. Tony didn't wait for an invitation. He joined the fight, giving the Asgardian warriors a brief reprieve. "Another Iron Man," Hogan grunted, rubbing a shoulder where he'd taken a blow. He swung his meteor hammer again at the Destroyer. "Human technology has advanced quickly," Volstagg said, hefting his double-edged axe and glancing at Tony. "No time for chatter," Sif snapped. "As impressive as your machines are, the Destroyer is one of Asgard's deadliest weapons. It is not something mere men can defeat." Tony answered with a bright, obnoxious beam. A stream of energy lanced from his gauntlet and sliced one of the Destroyer's arms free. The Asgardians went silent for a beat, then the armor's severed limb sparked, reattached itself, and there was no visible trace of damage. Sif's earlier point landed anew. "See," she said, "it cannot be broken." Fandral looked grim. "We cannot let ourselves be reckless. If the Destroyer wins here, we will all die." "Then we should attack, not argue," Volstagg shouted and charged. Fandral and Sif followed. Thor, however, was not with them. He was being held inside a nearby house under shield guard, surrounded by agents. He looked small and helpless in ordinary clothes, stripped of his usual power, according to the stories, unable to leave. He thrashed against the restraints with frustration. "Thor, they're trying to keep you safe," Jane Foster said softly, standing at the door with worried eyes. She had convinced herself he was the man she loved, but she also knew the reality. Odin had punished him and sent him to Earth as a mortal. He was outmatched by the Destroyer in this state. Shield's protection, however intrusive, made sense. "We can't risk letting you go," Agent Coulson said, heart heavy. "If you die here, it could spark a war between Asgard and Earth. Do you want all of Earth to pay for your family's fight?" Thor wanted to argue, to insist he could handle Loki. He wanted to be the one to end this. But he understood the stakes, and for the moment he held his tongue until an agent burst in. "Sir, the town has been evacuated," the agent reported. Coulson exhaled and nodded. "Good. We should withdraw. Our orders are to protect Thor. Now that the civilians are clear, we need to get him somewhere safe." Thor stood straight. "The Destroyer is here for me," he said. "Hiding will not help. Let me try. Loki is my brother. I don't believe he will kill me." "Thor, we can't take that risk." Coulson replied, "This is your family's war, but you are the fuse between Asgard and Earth now. If you die here." Before Coulson could finish, the wall exploded inward. Iron Man crashed through and skidded to a halt a few yards away, smoke spiraling from mangled armor. Everyone turned. Well, Tony said, lifting his helmet and revealing a bruised, scarred face, I sure picked a dramatic entrance. He tried to smile, but the wear was plain. Sorry about the redecorating. Can someone get me a doctor? I've lost feeling below the knees. Coulson's relief shifted into exasperation as he pointed. Tony, stop him. He's Thor. Tony shrugged, grinning despite the smoke. I would, but my newest armor's been disassembled. And hey, could someone get me a pretty doctor? This suit's on the fritz. He waved his injured feet like a man joking to hide pain. Coulson motioned to his men. Get him out of the line of fire. Now. As agents moved to escort Tony away, one of them asked in a flat voice, Sir, what do we do now? He gestured toward the street where Thor had already slipped past the barricade and faced the destroyer. Coulson could only stare. Prepare for war, he said at last. It wasn't an order born of bravado, but of resignation. The destroyer had just knocked Asgardian elites back like toys, people who were no ordinary human opponents, and yet no force on Earth seemed to have an answer. Around him, the agents' faces went pale. Ordinary tactics felt utterly inadequate. Are we actually going to win? One agent whispered. Not unless a miracle happens, another said. Then, almost as if answering them, something remarkable occurred. There was a flash of light and a soft thunderclap. A hammer, small for a moment and then impossibly heavy, arched through the air and struck the pavement between Thor and the destroyer. It spun and rose by itself, heading straight for Thor's waiting hand. The agents who had been hanging on to a thread of hope all shouted at once. Did the hammer! Oh my God, someone breathed. He's alive! Chapter 39. I missed a date. Thor, the god of thunder, had grown up. That hard-earned maturity showed. When the destroyer struck him down and he fell as a mortal, it was Odin's power and his hammer, Mjolnir, that pulled him back and restored him to godhood. Now that a portion of his divine strength had returned, the destroyer, stripped of Odin's direct command, was little more than scrap. Thor shattered it without mercy. Watching that effortless demolition, it was impossible not to think of all the lives and sweat that had gone into making the destroyer. Their sacrifices looked suddenly futile, and that stung. Life was unfair in strange ways. Some people could rise from obscurity to become princes or superheroes, while others worked and lost everything. Coulson found himself thinking, half amused, half bitter, that he'd liked Thor better when the Thunder God could be restrained like anyone else. Thor, resplendent in armor and cape, looked nothing like the swaggering drunk he'd once been. He smiled at Coulson. I'm sorry for the trouble on Earth these past days, he said. I'd like to talk more, but Asgard calls. I must go. Then another time, Coulson said, smiling outwardly while inwardly knowing there probably wouldn't be a next time. I'll buy you that drink, Thor promised, and I'll explain why Asgard will never attack Earth. He nodded toward Tony Stark. Tell your Iron Man I'm grateful, he added, and turned to Jane Foster. Coulson watched Thor walk away, Jane beside him, and felt a small, complicated tug of envy. Then he straightened. Report it to the director, he told his team. This mission's over. We'll call this a success. Give everyone some leave. He picked up the phone and called Nick Fury. They agreed the agents deserved time off. Fighting gods, even surviving them, took a toll. Fury asked about Thor. His rainbow bridge has appeared a few times, Coulson said. We logged the energy signatures. Hopefully we'll find out more next time. He glanced at the shattered destroyer a short distance away and frowned. They left something behind. Bring it in, Fury said at once. Get that armor back to New York. Understood, sir. Coulson masked his disappointment. His planned break had suddenly shrunk. At S.H.I.E.L.D.'s medical research facility in New York, Nick Fury hung up the phone and allowed a rare, small smile. If S.H.I.E.L.D. could get its hands on destroyer tech, things even Iron Man hadn't beaten, they could study it, reverse engineer something powerful, and at last stop worrying about cosmic-level threats. Maria Hill cleared her throat. Those are good things to think about, Director, but there's another matter you should know. Fury straightened. How is Captain Rogers? Stable, Maria said. He could wake at any time. She paused. But I mean a different problem. General Ross and his people have somehow replicated Hulk-like powers. A brown giant has appeared and is tearing up Manhattan. Where? Fury's eyes sharpened. Manhattan, she answered. For now, let the military handle it, Fury said. If it comes to that, have Tony intervene with Ross afterward. We need the Hulk, but we don't need an uncontrolled one on our doorstep. Maria's tone turned pointed. Do you expect the man from the bar to step in again? Or did you forget what happened last time? Fury's jaw tightened. He hadn't forgotten. The previous incident had involved a mysterious intervention from someone connected to a bar. The details had been messy and almost embarrassing for Fury. I remember, he said. And last time, it wasn't the bar's owner. It was someone else. The so-called second-generation Flash, Henry Allen. He's stepped in before. He has his own reasons for showing up. Maria raised an eyebrow, but didn't press it. Fury wanted first-hand intelligence before committing S.H.I.E.L.D.'s resources. Send a recon team, he said, but don't escalate unless you're sure. Maria nodded and left. No sooner had she gone than alarms began screaming through the facility. Fury flicked to the internal feed and saw it. Captain Steve Rogers had awakened. He'd broken free of his guards and was moving fast. That should have made Fury relieved, but there was no time for a smile. Rogers was disoriented. If he ran into the giant in Manhattan, it could end badly. Captain America was strong, but he was still human. Fury had to stop him before he collided with a monster-sized problem. Captain, Steve Rogers, hold on, Fury called, not minding who heard him. Most people by now didn't remember what the captain had done for them in the past. Museums treated him like a curiosity. But Fury didn't care about public perception. He needed to reach Steve before the city did. Rogers was still caught in the fog of the moment when he'd been frozen in time. He looked around wildly, disoriented by everything that no longer matched his memories. He found himself somewhere unfamiliar, and before he could make sense of it, a voice called his name. "Where is this?" Rogers asked, staring at the man with the eye patch. His voice was a mixture of confusion and old, wary courage. "This is New York, Captain," Fury said simply. He saw the bewilderment settle deeper into Rogers' face and felt a twinge of something like pity. New York, 70 years from when you went under. Rogers scanned the skyline, buildings unfamiliar, lights and signs that didn't belong in his world. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering what was left of a dream. Then, in a single quiet line that bore more sorrow than anger, he said, "I missed an appointment." Chapter 40, Raster's Mission. Nearly a month had passed since the Hulk tore through Manhattan. The shock had dulled. People had begun to forget the terror of being crushed under the green and brown giants. A new second-generation Flash had also appeared, and the public's attention was shifting to him. It was called a second generation not because of lineage, but because this Flash was a different breed entirely. He didn't deliver takeout, for one thing. Jiangju's tavern was still open as always. To most people, it was an ordinary, rather uninspiring bar with mediocre drinks. That suited Jiangju fine. He had wanted a tavern, not a circus that disrupted ordinary lives. Ah! Jiangju pushed the tavern door open, stepped out, and stretched as he surveyed the street. A voice at his feet complained, not aloud, but directly into his ear by sound transmission. "Hey, could you try being a bit more serious? People are actually saying your personality is wrong. Some even call you garbage." "That person already took dimensional compression," Jiangju replied as he rubbed his eyes, "so don't worry about them. Time flies. We've been here almost a year." "What? A year? I never noticed." Xiao He sounded surprised. "That's because you only go out at night," Jiangju said, moving with an ease that set him apart from the commuters hurrying past. "You still staying in the pub all day?" "Because it's comfortable here. Why move?" Jiangju said lazily. "You said I'm invincible now. If I were really that busy, why would I have trained so hard before? I missed out on a lot of beautiful things because of cultivation. It's a little sad to think about." "Do you regret it?" Xiao He asked. "How could I? Everything I did was my choice, my experience. No regrets." Jiangju lifted his face and took in a long breath of the cold city air. "The air in New York really is terrible." "You know that and you still breathe in like that?" Xiao He muttered. "Because I'm a sand sculpture. Young sand sculptures are happier, don't you know?" Jiangju said, one eyebrow raised. "All right, enough philosophizing," Xiao He said, turning. "Customers are coming. Time to go back." Inside, Jiangju snapped a quick cleansing spell over the bar, turned on the TV, and let the news chatter fill the background. Reports still circled Iron Man and the new Flash. And of course, the familiar debate: who pays for the damage the superheroes cause? Talk show pundits fanned the frenzy. People only remember superheroes when there's a crisis, Xiao Hai snorted through Jiang Ju's ear. Then those so-called conscience media steer public anger any which way. They need a place to vent, Jiang Ju said calmly as he polished a glass. It's easier to blame a stranger with a cape than to think. Negative news runs for days. Clarifications vanish in a day. People forgive their own errors, but heap scorn on others. It's human nature. A familiar voice cut through the commentary. Seems I'm the first today. I wanted an early drink. Jiangju didn't even need to turn to know who it was. The province's famed courier had become a regular. He glanced up and saw a man in a mage's robe, the insignia of Winterhold College clear across his shoulders. You've been living well lately, Jiangju said with a smile. Congratulations on becoming the Archmage. Ha, don't make it sound so grand. Rust laughed, pride stamped all over him. Still, thanks. To celebrate, make me something special. I'm treating. You're the tavern master now, right? Of course. Jiangju waved his hand and began pulling ingredients out of the air as if reaching into an invisible pantry. Red, purple, and blue shards of crystal, a few clear gems that hummed with chill, a cup of thick crimson liquid, and a light, fragrant spirit. Under his practiced hands, the components mixed and reacted, a faint luminescence seeping through. He poured the result into a crystal glass, a liquor that shimmered violet. That's beautiful. What is it? Rust asked, delighted. Since it's for your celebration, I'll call it Dragonborn, Jiangju said. There's a drop of Shenlong's blood in it. The dragon's essence helps cultivate the dragon spirit in the body. Drink it, and your dragon roar will be doubled. Long-term use might even let you take on draconic form. Boss, you're amazing, and handsome too. Rust toasted, then drank. Jiangju accepted the praise with a shrug and a lazy grin. With another wave, the tools and leftover ingredients vanished. A bottle of Dragonborn appeared in the cabinet, available for purchase. Hey, why are people showing up late today? Rust asked after finishing his glass. He tasted no after effects. The celebratory drink had been tailored for him and needed no digestion time. You came too early, Xiao Hai replied, munching on a purple bamboo snack. Even Zeus only showed up that early for the first few days. Is that so? Rust laughed, a little embarrassed. All right, it's not just to show off. I actually have a commissioned job. Jingju's interest piqued. A commission? What kind? That'll get a lot of people interested. Rust leaned in, the grin fading into something more serious. I've been hired to lead a few warriors on a mission, to save my world. It's been suffering, and I couldn't sit by. I'm putting together a team. Jingju set the glass down and wiped a spot on the bar. Around them, the tavern buzzed with ordinary life, but the air between the three of them carried the weight of what came next. Rust came to the tavern looking for help. She'd thought that being named head of Winterhold College was scandal enough, but nothing had prepared her for vampires turning up in her world. She'd seen vampires before in tavern stories, but meeting them in person was different. She'd been ambushed and nearly lost herself. Worse still, she barely recognized the younger sister who'd been following her. Vampires in her world weren't the old folklore type that had to bite a neck. They could turn people with magic. Fortunately, there were counters for that too. An antidote, a disease-removing potion, could neutralize the transformation. That potion had saved her, and from there, the whole mess began. After that, Rust's life got tangled with the Dawn Guard. She joined the organization and took part in the so-called Great Journey, hunting vampires. On one mission, she met Serana, a dangerously attractive vampire whose father was Lord Harkon of the Volkihar clan. Harkon was gathering power and openly talked of ruling the world, an ambition that made Rust's skin crawl. Wait a minute, wasn't this all about saving the world? Xiao Hai blurted out, cutting into Rust's story. Don't interrupt. I'm telling you, Rust snapped, waving a hand and then continuing. She explained how Serana had been involved, how her father Harkon was a major threat, and how the Dawn Guard and others were dragging her into things she had never expected. Harkon's trying to conquer everything, she said. I'm no match for those kinds of forces on my own. And where are your friends? The Dawn Guard? Jiangju asked, curious. After all, Rust lived in that world, not in a game. She should be able to call on allies. Rust smiled ruefully. I'm in love with Serana, she admitted. Then her expression fell. They all think I betrayed humanity by being with a vampire. Jiangju nodded slowly. It was clear Rust had fallen hard for Serana. He wondered privately whether she'd feel the same once she learned how pure-blood vampires were made. For now, he kept that thought to himself. You could post the job on the tavern homepage, Jiangju suggested. Maybe you haven't noticed the system? I did look, Rust said, but I don't know how to pick the right people. I came straight to you. Please, boss. The tavern was filling up as they spoke. Regulars drifted in, greeted Jiangju casually, took their seats, drank, and scrolled through the tavern's online notice board. A few people were already clicking the mission post. Hey, the boss himself posted this, someone muttered excitedly. It's a big assignment. Dragons in that world? No way I'm going there, another person said, causing his companion to give him a long look. Even if you can't go, you can watch, a third answered. The whole thing will be broadcast, live in the pub and online. Don't be short-sighted, another regular chimed in. You never know, one day one of us could be on a mission. We were lucky to find this tavern, why not take a shot? People clustered around the post now, reading the mission details and the restrictions Jiangju had set. He'd limited the expedition to 4 people, and each person had to either know some magic or have a connection to vampires. The rules were strict. Too many powerful participants might attract the attention of demon gods. Those beings weren't a problem for Jiangju personally, but they were inconvenient enough to merit careful control. Why so many restrictions? We want to save the world, Rust complained, hopping up onto a bar stool and staring at him. Because your world has too many demon gods. Jiangju replied plainly. If too many powerful people enter, they'll draw notice. That can spiral into something a lot worse. Better to keep the team small and specialized. Rust pouted. Under those limitations, many of her acquaintances wouldn't qualify. I don't know who to pick. I'll choose for you, for a fee, Jiangju said, calm as ever. You and your money eyes, Rust grumbled, slapping a pouch of coins on the counter and flashing him an anxious smile. This should be enough. Anything extra is a tip. After all, I'm the principal of the Magic Academy now. Jiangju weighed the pouch with a frown. Not nearly enough. Even the Dragonborn paid several times this. He set the pouch down with a theatrical sigh. Rust dug into another pocket and added more coins. For an adventurer who spent time in haunted cemeteries, gold wasn't the issue. Jiangju grinned, hugging the bag like a prized cat. Money talks. I'll pick the best team I can. 4 ornate cards slid out with a snap and hovered over the counter, each showing a portrait and a short bio. The tavern went quiet. Mushaling, Jiangju read. Taoist exorcist. Age, classified. A descendant of the Ma family, exorcists from the Dragon Clan. The portrait showed a long-legged young woman in a miniskirt and traditional talismans. Rust's eyes widened instinctively, then she chastised herself and looked at the next card. Dante, Devil Hunter. Age unknown. Has an unusual fondness for strawberry sundaes, he continued. The image was of a silver-haired man in a red coat, a massive sword slung over his shoulder. He looked lethal and stylish at the same time. The third, D, Vampire Hunter. Age unknown. This card showed a figure in a black trench coat and hat, another oversized sword resting on his shoulder. He had a melancholy air about him. And the fourth, Aka Yamoka. Student, age unspecified. The last portrait revealed a beautiful young woman with silver hair and blood-red eyes in a school uniform, an unsettlingly pretty vampire look. Rust blinked at the faces, fighting to keep her reaction neutral. Her surprise would have been obvious if she'd let it, but she managed to hold herself together, something Jiangju noticed with some satisfaction. Well? Rust asked, hands on her hips. These 4 fit your conditions, Jiangju said. They know magic, hunt monsters, or have ties to the kind of things you're facing. If you want the best chance of keeping this to 4 people and staying under the demon god's radar, this is the team. Rust stared at the portraits for a long moment, the weight of the mission settling in. This wouldn't be simple, not with Harkon trying to rule the world, vampires who could transform humans with a spell, and a love that had already made her betray expectations. But the choice had to be made. She nodded once, sharp and decisive. All right, she said, pick them. We move fast. Chapter 42, Arrival of Staff. Jiangju had chosen 4 people for Lassiter's job, and they were a good fit. Among them were Di and Qie Mengxiang, both vampires, Ma Xiaoling, an exorcist, and Dante, a demon hunter. It was also worth noting that the regular at the tavern was the S-class demon Akaya Mocha, not the sealed Mocha everyone whispered about. "They're all strangers to me," Lassiter said. "Then use this chance to get to know each other." Jiangju replied with a smile. Brick, sitting in the corner with a strawberry sundae, called out, "Dante, we've got a job." Dante looked up through a mouthful of sundae. "A job? The one that just popped up?" "That's the one. This is the client. You should know her," Jiangju said, pointing at Lassiter. "I know you." Dante grinned at her. "Aren't you the Queen Lassiter everyone in this tavern envies?" "Why am I the queen?" Lassiter said, visibly pleased but playing coy. "Because you've got a harem in a tavern. People call you the queen out of jealousy," Jiangju said calmly. "Oh, that's jealousy, huh?" Lassiter laughed. She wasn't offended. She'd always been rather libidinous before Serana showed up in her life. Dante smiled. "Live openly like that. It's the most fun. You're in my good books. As long as the price is right, I'll help." "What if the price isn't right?" Lassiter asked. "Then I'll be your emotional support friend," Dante said without expression. Lassiter rolled her eyes, knowing he was joking. "I'm not short on money." Across the room, Ma Xiaoling stared at the strange tattoo on her arm with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. At first, she assumed it was some bold, ghostly mark and checked herself all over, finding nothing. The tattoo suddenly glowed and a small image appeared on her skin, a website for a place called Yujian Tavern. She knew what a website was. It was the year 2000 in her world, and Hong Kong had long since returned to the motherland. But seeing one on her arm was absurd. A pop-up then announced that she had qualified to enter the tavern. With a single thought, she could open the gateway and step inside. "I should see if it's real," Ma Xiaoling told herself. Brave by nature, she gathered her exorcism tools, and the image of a simple wooden door formed in her house. She opened it and walked through without showing any surprise. She stepped into a medium-sized bar. People filled the room, some of them not human at all. Her hand went instinctively to her exorcism sword, and she was about to draw it when someone stopped her, a very handsome man. "Don't be nervous, Miss Ma Xiaoling. This isn't a haunted cave," the man said. "It was Jiangju, the sort of handsomeness you always meant when you thought of him." "There's a tavern here?" Ma Xiaoling frowned. "Yes, a magical place that connects countless worlds. Where you are now is another world entirely," Jiangju explained, smiling. Ma Xiaoling hesitated, but realized the monsters here seemed stronger than the usual nuisances she dealt with. She followed Jiangju to a table where several people were already waiting. "This is the exorcist, Ma Xiaoling," Jiangju introduced. Then he turned to Ma Xiaoling. "These are your employers, Queen Lassiter, Dante, and Qie Mengxiang." Ma Xiaoling glanced at the group. "And the other one? The Japanese-looking person. Is she a monster too? This tavern really has everything." Akaya Mocha, pale hair and red eyes, exuding a queenly presence, sneered without rising. "You don't like monsters? I have no problem with monsters. I make my living from them." Ma Xiaoling smiled placidly. "All right, girls, stop fighting. You're not from the same world," Jiangju chided lightly. "Don't drag your old grudges and settings from other worlds into here." Ma Xiaoling and Qi Mengxiang exchanged a cold snort and ignored each other. Jiangju sighed inwardly. Really, the tension was Ma Xiaoling's fault, but the other woman's personality made it pointless to press the issue. "Let me brief you, Miss Ma Xiaoling," Jiangju said. "You'll be working together in a few days." Lassiter watched Ma Xiaoling closely. She'd noticed the newcomer had only just arrived and wondered why Jiangju had chosen her. After a short conversation between Lassiter and Ma Xiaoling, it became clear. Ma Xiaoling, who had seemed detached and wary, changed the moment payment was mentioned. The reward Lassiter offered made her agree immediately, and for the first time since arriving in the tavern, she showed a genuine, happy smile. "So who are we waiting for now?" Ma Xiaoling asked, mostly curious, and partly to test whether this whole world travel thing was real. The money helped too, though she'd never admit that aloud. "Vampire D is a powerful one," Lassiter explained. "His thing is hunting vampires." "A vampire hunter?" Ma Xiaoling said with a twist in her voice. Some people should watch their backs. You should worry about yourself. Dee and I go way back, little witch, Chia Mengshang said lightly. Who are you calling little witch? Ma Xiaoling snapped. Come down and find out who it is, Chia Mengshang said with a casual shrug. Chapter 43, Target Skyrim Province. Jiang Ju thought Ma Xiaoling and Chia Mengshang ought to be friends. After all, berating someone could be a form of affection, and Chia Mengshang's flirtatiousness was almost cute. He watched them with a fond, almost fatherly expression, which made the two of them shiver. Where's Dee? Why hasn't he shown up? Lust glanced at the clock. It was already noon. He turned to Jiang Ju. Boss, can you order one of Master Zhao's set meals? If you're paying, you can order anything, Jiang Ju said, holding out his hand to Lust. Pay up. Everyone gets one. Since Rust was feeling generous, he paid for the whole table. Put me down for a strawberry sundae. Dante piped up immediately. Master Zhao? Who's that? Ma Xiaoling asked, curious. Stephen Zhou is basically the god of cookery in this age, Chia Mengshang declared, momentarily dropping her regal air in delight. His food is amazing. You're a vampire, and you eat human food? I thought you only drank blood, Ma Xiaoling teased. Do you really think I'm that low level? Chia Mengshang snorted. Human blood is foul. I won't touch it. She ignored Ma Xiaoling and peered at the menu next to Lust. Jiang Ju had arranged the menu with Stephen Zhou in advance. Guests could order anything from the chef through the tavern's webpage. Jiang Ju charged a modest delivery fee and a freshness fee. That way, patrons could enjoy food cooked by the chef himself, and Jiang Ju made a little on service. He'd thought it was a brilliant plan. Ma Xiaoling chatted with Chia Mengshang, occasionally provoking her on purpose to test them. They seemed reliable enough, but Ma Xiaoling wasn't ready to reach any conclusions after less than a day. There's an old saying, you can know a person's face but not their heart. She meant to be careful. The food arrived quickly. Ma Xiaoling examined her plate discreetly and noticed nothing was wrong. There was even a faint golden sheen to the dishes. When she tasted them, she felt a subtle improvement in herself. Surprised, she looked to Jiang Ju. Stephen Zhou, who is he, really? He's a divine chef who once came down to the mortal world to gain experience. The food he prepares holds a trace of immortal energy, Jiang Ju explained. He controls it carefully. Mortals can't directly absorb such energy, so it's held at a safe level. Ma Xiaoling listened, skeptical as ever. Much of what she'd said earlier had been half jokes to keep her guard up, but now things seemed different than she'd expected. Could this tavern really be what it appeared to be? If you like the food, try the tavern's wine, Lust said with a smile when he saw Ma Xiaoling's reaction. Those are even stronger. Everyone reacts like this the first time they come in, Rust said. There's always some distrust, but you'll see, although this boss here loves money with all his heart, his craftsmanship is top-notch. If you'd left out the last sentence, I might be happier, Jiang Ju grumbled. If I compliment you, will you give me a discount? Lust asked mischievously. Of course not. Stop dreaming, Jiang Ju replied immediately. Money was his one unbending rule. Fine. If there are no perks, why should I flatter you? Lust snorted. You're not wrong, Jiang Ju admitted, speechless. Ma Xiaoling couldn't help smiling. If what was happening here was genuine, Jiang Ju's identity was probably more complicated than it looked, but nothing had been put on for her benefit. Some gods and divine beings she knew were entirely different. Time passed. Jiang Ju spent most of it reading by the window and occasionally joining conversations. Ma Xiaoling picked up the rhythm of the tavern and even watched a video of Rust completing a mission in another world. She found herself intrigued by the prospect. A tall, dark figure then appeared, and the faint scent of blood lingered in the air around him. He looked freshly returned from a battlefield. Long black hair, slightly curly, and an air of quiet competence. He walked straight toward their table. Sorry I'm late. I ran into trouble, Dee said, scanning the group before giving Ma Xiaoling a slight nod of greeting. You came straight from a battle, didn't you? Chia Mengshang wrinkled her nose. You still smell of blood. Time and resources are tight. I was serving in a desert region. Dee's tone was matter of fact. As a vampire hunter, he held no particular hostility toward Akaya Mocha. Whatever disagreements had existed before had been resolved. I'm Lust, no introduction necessary, Lust said, undeterred by Dee's lateness. These two are exorcists or demon hunters like you. This handsome one is Dante, and this is Ma Xiaoling. Nice to meet you, Dee replied with a brief nod. He was a man of few words. It looks like we're all here, Jiangju said, approaching the group. This employer is Rust. Your mission is to stop a vampire lord in that world from defiling, blotting out the sun. Vampires fear sunlight. When the sun rises, their ability to fight is greatly diminished, though not eliminated. Be careful when that happens. The situation sounds like mine, Dee said after a moment, but the vampires there seem a bit stronger than the ones from my world. They're definitely different from our vampires, Qia Mengxiang said, raising an eyebrow and glancing at Ma Xiaoling in a teasing way, though Ma Xiaoling ignored her. So what's their weakness? Dante asked between bites of his strawberry sundae. If you cut off the head, they die, Rust shrugged. If we're talking vulnerabilities, their resistance to things like sunlight and fire is lower than normal. All right, then they can be killed, Dante said, a little relieved. He wasn't versed in magic, but decapitation was his specialty. Most demons had met their end that way. Chapter 44. Girls Who Aren't Afraid of Winter? After 3 days of discussion, Rust and the others agreed to give each other a 3-day window to prepare. They would meet again at the tavern and then travel together to Skyrim Province. One last chance to save the world and to indulge, however briefly, in the thrill of being heroes. I still think this place is strange, Ma Xiaoling said as the others left. She walked over to Jiangju and stood at his side. It's normal, Jiangju replied with a shrug. Anyone who comes here for the first time feels it, especially the powerful ones. How do you know? She asked. You convince them with strength, Jiangju said simply. In a world like this, the only thing people truly trust is absolute power. When they see it for themselves, there's no point in arguing. It removes doubt. Ma Xiaoling blinked. She hadn't expected that answer, but it made sense. Even a skeptic would accept power when faced with it. Still, she hesitated to accept Jiangju's claim about his own strength. That's part of it, Jiangju added, reading her expression. You didn't feel it because you had no intent to fight me. You were cautious, so I didn't have to prove anything. I just let you feel it. She looked at him, surprised, and then fell silent. Seeing it firsthand was always more convincing than hearing tales. Ma Xiaoling now believed the tavern's reality, though a little part of her still wanted to see other worlds for herself. 3 days passed quickly. Ma Xiaoling and the others finished their preparations, donned their combat gear, and gathered at the tavern with weapons and props in hand, waiting for Rust, who, as their employer, still hadn't shown up. Sorry, overslept. About 10 minutes late, Rust arrived, hair mussed as if he just jumped out of bed. He looked sheepish. Hey, young man, you might be young, but you should know how to be punctual, Jiangju called out with a teasing whistle. I don't know what you mean. Rust snorted and tugged up his collar to hide the faint smile at the corner of his mouth. The queen is indeed the queen, Dante said with a grin. The others were curious, but Rust gave them no chance to ask questions. The contract had been signed 3 days ago. There was nothing left to negotiate. He simply said, "Let's go," turned, and walked through the portal. The others followed. Jiangju muttered, "You didn't even let me finish," then flicked out a sliver of purple light, split into 4 doppelgangers, and in an instant closed the gap to the group. Because the 4 had their backs to him, no one noticed his sudden catch-up. Zeus, who'd come early to watch the live feed, tilted his head at the TV. What's that thing trailing behind them? Some kind of protection? It's a protection, yes, but specifically to hide them from the notice of the gods and demons in that world, Jiangju said, switching on the broadcast. Rust's destination is riddled with gods and demons, and they're nosy types. They'd sniff out outsiders. I used a little trick to make the 4 of them look like locals so they wouldn't draw attention. That makes sense, Zeus said with a small nod. In the world I'm from, like many modern worlds, belief is free, but the Greek pantheon is orthodox and real. The gods there have ways of marking and identifying people. They'd be able to spot any intruders. On the screen, a world of ice and snow washed over the audience. Rust and the others appeared on the live feed, walking toward the College of Winterhold. Rust narrated as they went. Why do they look so out of place? Stephen Zhao frowned. It's freezing there, and they're dressed like it's summer. Mengbo leaned forward. They're all magic users. They don't need winter clothes like ordinary people. Still, it looks weird. He was studying the feed intently, more interested, it seemed, in Ma Xiaoling's long legs than in fashion. On the screen, she wore a white, short leather jacket, a skirt, and tall boots. As an S-rank demon, Akaya Moka didn't mind the cold at all and was dressed in a Japanese-style school uniform, a summer outfit. Rust himself had modified the first master of Winterhold's robe into a modern, cool version. The group trudged through snow and along the way encountered small snow-dwelling animals and the occasional direwolf. The wolves, unfortunate for them, ended up providing meat and pelts. As they approached Winterhold's political center, a small or battered town, Ma Xiaoling asked, curious, "Why is this place so run down?" "An explosion," Rust said. "They say the College of Winterhold caused it. 2/3 of the area was destroyed. Most of the people who could or would leave already did. What's left is largely within the college's territory, so the people here aren't exactly welcoming toward mages." "What about the Lord? Didn't he do anything?" Ma Xiaoling asked. "What could he do?" Rust shrugged. "Skyrim's climate is brutal, and Winterhold is one of its coldest places. The Lord has to hang on here. If he leaves, he loses everything. There aren't many choices." "So how do people make a living?" she asked, looking over the ruined town. "Mostly hunting, gathering herbs, and making medicines," Rust explained. "Winterhold isn't farmland. You survive by using whatever the ice and snow have to offer. People make do. That's how they live." Chapter 45. The mission begins. Winterhold was a place of perpetual snow, remote and sparsely populated. That isolation was exactly why mages who preferred to keep to themselves had chosen it as the site for their college. "This is Winterhold. Come on in. There's no city gate. Bandits don't bother coming this far north," Rust said, explaining why only guards and no gate protected the town. Their arrival made the townspeople uneasy. If the strangers hadn't been with Rust, the armored guards might have made a move. "Who are they? We don't welcome outsiders in Winterhold. And look how they're dressed," grumbled a dark-skinned, broad-shouldered man, eyeing Chai and the others suspiciously. "They're my guests," Rust snapped. "Don't point fingers at my company. Take any complaints to your lord." A woman in a thick leather coat brightened when she recognized Rust. "Rust, I heard you joined the Dawn Guard. Why don't you go back to hunting vampires?" "My work isn't your concern," Rust shot back. Then she shepherded the group away toward the cliffside, where the ancient stone keep of the college sat, built into the edge of the crag. "You don't seem very popular here," Ma Xiaoling observed as they walked. "If someone yelled at you all day, you wouldn't like them either," Rust said. After the last accident, 2/3 of Winterhold was destroyed. The townsfolk blamed the mages for the explosion. "Prices shot up for us just because we're mages. Even now, most of the professors don't trust me. They don't tell me everything that goes on in the college." "What happened in the explosion?" Chia Mengxiang asked. Rust's short recounting was cautious. "Nobody's told me the details. They say an experiment went wrong. I'm technically the Archmage now, but I was appointed by the previous Archmage because I saved the college from that crisis. He died in it. I don't care about their politics, anyway. I only care about stopping Alduin." "Alduin?" Dante asked. "What's that?" "A dragon," Rust said. "A huge one. They call him the World Eater. I don't yet know everything about him, but that's why I'm here." "So that's why you've come," Ma Xiaoling said. "Maybe," Rust shrugged. "It doesn't matter. I've found where I belong. First, we need to get settled in Winterhold. Then, after I speak with Serana, we'll find someone who can help decipher the Elder Scrolls." By then, they had reached the gate in the cliff face. The iron doors opened automatically as they approached and closed behind them. The road was paved with flagstone and built right into the steep wall. Magic-lit wells dotted the cliffside. Rust explained they powered the protective wards of the college. "Welcome back, Archmage. Who are the people with you?" called a bald, middle-aged man as they entered the courtyard. "Good morning, Phoenix. These are friends of mine. We have business to do, so we'll talk later," Rust replied, keeping the introduction brief. Phoenix began to speak again. Enrollment was soon to open, but Rust and the others moved off before he could finish. The courtyard had a practice area where a few young mages were running drills. Some of the college folk greeted Rust warmly. Others watched them as if she were an imposter. Rust explained, matter-of-factly, that being appointed Archmage overnight had left many resentful. This is the only place in all of Skyrim that trains mages properly. Handing it over to someone like me makes people uneasy, she said with a wry smile. They climbed the tower and entered a chamber the size of a courtyard. In its center was a small garden. A single tree grew among various enchanted plants, lit by several glowing arcane orbs. "Back so soon?" a cool voice called. A woman in tight red armor stepped out from the shadows. Her eyes were the deep red of a vampire, exactly like Chaya's. "Serana," Rust said with relief, taking the woman's hand. "I brought a few friends. Our chances just got better." Rust introduced the four newcomers. Serana's expression went cold when she saw Chaya and Dee. Most vampires in her experience had been untrustworthy. Rust rushed to reassure her. "They're different. You can trust them." That softened Serana's stance. Chaya and Dee showed no offense at Serana's caution. They understood the stakes and accepted a bit of suspicion in return for a chance to help. "What's the plan?" Ma Xiaoling asked. "The Elder Scrolls are written with powerful magics. Ordinary people can't read them, and not many can. The only one I know who can help is the ancestral moth priest," Serana said. "I found his whereabouts yesterday. He lives in Dragonbridge." "Then let's go," Ma Xiaoling said. They couldn't waste time. If Alduin's prophecy was coming true, they had to learn what the scrolls said and stop whatever her superstitious, prophecy-obsessed father intended, for Rust and Serana's sake, and for everyone else's. The six of them set off. Rust arranged a carriage for the trip to Dragonbridge. Ma Xiaoling and Chie didn't ride horses, and with a strong team it took them 3 days. They encountered petty thieves and, more worrying, a band of vampires that had been trailing them. The vampires hunted them, the six fought back, and the attackers were slain. "Looks like your father is looking for the ancestral moth priest too," Dante remarked dryly, watching the final vampire fall. "We need to hurry," Serana said. She was sharp and composed. The urgency in her voice made the rest of them move faster. "Maybe I can help," Ma Xiaoling offered. She produced a talisman and explained, "This will boost a horse's stamina and speed several times over. There's a cost. The horse may die after using it. I didn't want to use it unless it was necessary, but I think we'll have to." Chapter 46. Loki and Thanos. The battles of the Six Lusters were broadcast live, but not continuously. Not everyone wanted to watch straight, uncut footage of people charging into danger, and the streams shown in taverns were always edited. They cut out the food breaks, the awkward silences, even the worst bits. Otherwise, it wouldn't really be a live broadcast. It would be something else entirely. Between clips, people drank, argued, or turned to other news to catch up on the wider world. For many who couldn't leave the inn, the screen was the only window they had. "How have you been lately? I heard the Bifrost was destroyed by your brother, and you vanished at the time," Jiangju asked, smiling as he looked at the man across from him. Loki, the same slippery, charming god everyone knew, returned his smile with a hint of mischief. "I met someone. A man collecting 6 gems. He called himself Thanos. I thought you might find that interesting." "Thanos," Jiangju said lightly. "He has big ideals, but he's gone about them the wrong way. There are 2 Infinity Stones on Earth right now. I don't think he'll stay away for long." "I thought there was only one," Loki said, surprised. "The Time Stone is on Earth. Almost everyone in the universe knows that, which is why your father hid the Space Stone here," Jiangju explained. Loki's eyes narrowed. "So there's someone powerful on Earth," Loki said. He wasn't slow. He understood what Jiangju meant immediately. "Yes," Jiangju replied. "Before I arrived here, Earth had its protector. Outsiders didn't come to Earth lightly." "The Sorcerer Supreme?" Loki asked. "I heard of him," Loki mused. "My father mentioned a powerful guardian once, but I would have forgotten if you hadn't brought it up. So she's on Earth?" "Let me tell you something that will probably make you angrier," Jiangju said calmly. "Your brother was stripped of his power and sent to the mortal world. Your father had a plan. He discussed it with the Sorcerer Supreme. That's why, when the Destroyer was about to kill Thor, she didn't intervene." Loki's face twisted with contempt. What a cunning father. Thanks for the clarification. No wonder Thanos didn't have the confidence to invade outright and instead offered to help me get revenge. So that's his angle. He probably intends to draw more attention to Earth, get other fools and glory seekers to come here to look for another stone. That will force the Sorcerer Supreme to act and drain her life and power, Jiangju said, nodding. So I'm just a pawn, Loki said, smiling ironically. Interesting. You think my boss, your boss, wants me to persuade Thanos? Yes. Only if you attack Earth will they truly understand the need to unite. You're a key part of that plan. Jiangju regarded Loki for a moment. By the way, I can help you once in the future. Help me? Loki leaned forward, curious. But before he could ask, Jiangju stood and angling the tavern's screen back to the broadcast, he switched to the latest footage of the 6 lusters. Loki watched silently, muttering to himself that once the business in Asgard was settled, he would go to Earth. Far away, at the center of a vast fortress carved out of a planet, Thanos sat and tapped the armrest of his chair. All his life he had pursued balance. He had seen beautiful worlds squandered by waste, planets destroyed by overpopulation and war. He had come to a grim conclusion. The universe's resources were finite while its population grew relentlessly. If nothing changed, the universe might destroy itself. Thanos wanted to prevent that. He had decided on a brutal solution: remove half of life to give the rest a chance to survive. Convinced of his cause, he grew stronger, conquered, and increasingly believed his judgment was right. To realize it, he needed the 6 Infinity Stones, powerful relics born with the universe that could reshape reality itself. Over the years, he found only one for sure: the Mind Stone. He also learned, through various channels, that the Space Stone lay within the Asgardian realm, and the Time Stone was on a remote planet called Earth. He knew the names of key players too: the God King of Asgard and the Sorcerer Supreme of Earth, both forged in bloody conflict. Thanos was not afraid of death. He feared his plan failing. So he extended his influence, sending out formidable warriors to hunt the remaining stones, and waited for opportune moments. Then his agents discovered Loki, the Asgardian god, and their intelligence revealed a vulnerability in Odin. Thanos' strategy shifted. If Loki could be manipulated, he might be persuaded to rebel and to test the Sorcerer Supreme on Earth. If Loki led a strike, it could provoke a war between Earth and Asgard, a perfect way to draw out hidden stones and to wear down Earth's defenders. It killed multiple problems at once. Is it really wise to hand the Mind Stone to someone like him? One of Thanos' lieutenants asked in a low voice. It's just a stone, Thanos replied calmly. If Loki fails, I'll go there myself. He didn't sound worried, but we should disguise the gem, make sure the Asgardians don't sense it. Understood, my lord, the lieutenant said. Also, Thanos added, inform Gamora and Nebula to search for the Power Stone immediately. Tell them their father is displeased. Yes, sir. The man bowed and then reported more good news. Their forces had secured the planet Tyrax. Proceed according to plan, Thanos said. He stood, donned his armor, and took up his weapons. He involved himself in each massacre personally, not out of cruelty, but to remember those sacrifices as part of his drive for a harmonious universe. In his mind, those who perished were the price of mercy. Chapter 47, The Sacrifice of Salvation. Longqiao Town sat on the northwest edge of Skyrim Province, southwest of Lonely City. It was small and unremarkable, an unavoidable staging point for travelers moving between the Lonely Citadel and the rest of the province. The town lived off timber exports and fishing. Its single claim to fame was the dragon bridge that spanned the strait, linking the two banks. I always thought this bridge was made of keel, but it's nothing like that, Rust said with a grin as he stood before the span. Enough speculation. Let's go in, Serana said, leading the way into Longqiao. Rust came quietly behind her. Dante, in his usual wicked mood, sniped. I always thought Lassiter was stronger. Love sure makes people blind. The others ignored him, which only seemed to depress him a little as he fell into step with the group. A guard at the gate grew wary when he saw their number. Rust stopped him and asked whether anyone had seen the convoy of the ancestral priests that morning. The soldier stiffened and reached for his sword, but when Rust produced a small token, the mark of the Baron of Dugu City, he relaxed. Madam, I remember they were heading south this morning under military escort, the guard said, saluting and rubbing his chest. If you hurry, you might catch them. Rust nodded and led the group south. When the soldier had left, she explained the token. I'm officially a baron in 3 territories now, she said with a wry smile. Doesn't do me much good, but it keeps a lot of trouble from happening. I smell it, crab and human, Dee said suddenly. As the only bona fide vampire hunter among them, his senses were keen in ways the others lacked. The warning made everyone hasten their pace. They found the convoy before long. A ruined carriage and 2 or 3 bodies scattered on the road. The tracks and wounds spoke plainly of a vampire attack. Some had been killed outright, others taken. The group searched the corpses. The stench and the haste of the attack gave them little to go on. Seems my father has been looking into deciphering the ancient scrolls as well, Sirana said softly. What do? We don't know where they took the captives, Chai Moexiang asked, glancing toward Rust. I already checked the bodies of the vampires. No clues, Dee replied. They left in a hurry. The scent is clean. I can't trace the direction that way. You don't object to necromancy, do you? Rust asked the others. I can call the soul of one of these vampires. She shouldn't have been dead more than a day. I can pull the spirit and ask what it knows. Ma Xiaoling hesitated briefly, then nodded. This world and its magics were new to her. She was curious. Luster breathed a quiet sigh of relief. People in their world had always been wary of necromancers. Summoning a dead soul was, for many, a violation. No one liked the idea of their last secrets being pried from them. Rust himself wasn't a necromancer by trade, but the spell he cast leaned on soul magic and was technically necromancy. He murmured a few words, and a swirl of purple energy curled around his hand. With a soft push, the energy struck the body of one vampire. A pale, bluish soul lifted free. Rust held it with steady confidence. Where are you taking the sacrifices? He demanded. The ancestral cave, the spirit answered quickly. Lord Marcus will wash the priest's wills there and bind them to us. Rust probed for the cave's position, then let the soul go. The vaporized spirit blinked out, and the vampire's body remained just as it was. Rust unfolded a magical map of Skyrim province from his pack. The map marked places he had visited, but he could also use a soul's memory to mark an unvisited place. The memories he had just taken had fixed the cave's location for him. That was necromancy? Ma Xiaoling said, surprised. I thought it would be sinister, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't always evil, Sirana said. Necromancy started as a sacred art, helping the living say goodbye, communicating with the dead. But it's become corrupted. There are those who abused it, and people have turned fearful. When a necromancer can pry open a soul, secrets are exposed. That's why most of the world hates them. Necromancy has a way of exposing dark things, Luster added, so the easiest response for people is to vilify and destroy it. They didn't linger over the ethics. The priests were in danger, and time was short. They told Longchao's guards what had happened, requisitioned a few horses, and rode hard toward the ancestral cave. I assumed the ancestral cave was just a name, Dante grumbled as they dismounted later. I didn't expect it to actually be a cave. The vampires picked darkness for a reason, Dee said. Even standing here, you can smell the rot. Hey, don't forget there were 2 of them, Chai teased in a sweet voice. Sorry, didn't mean anything, Dee started, but the joke was met with a few barbed quips and some good-natured teasing. Rust, never one to pass up the chance to ham it up, performed a little dramatic flourish at the cave's mouth. Let's go in and put a stop to Marcus and his plans. The world still needs saving, he declared, voice far too grand for the situation. Save the Chunibu for the tavern, Sirana snapped, yanking him back. Your night vision's not that great anyway. If you get injured, don't expect me to be pleased. Healing magic isn't a miracle machine. I know. Sirana loves me most, Rust said, face falling somewhere between earnest and ridiculous. She glared, and he immediately cast a small light sphere that bobbed above his head. It would help find traps and illuminate the dark passages, though of the 6 of them, only Rust actually needed it. Ma Xiaoling's eyes worked as well in the dark as in daylight. They moved through the cave's mouth. After a short trek, the vampires struck. The attackers were determined. They wanted the sacrifices intact, not mindless thralls. The vampires understood the value of the priests. The priests' ability to read the ancient scrolls made them useful. Marcus wanted that ability preserved, even if the priests' wills were broken and reshaped. So the vampires' aim wasn't always to kill. They aimed to capture and scrub minds clean. The skirmish tested them, but the party fought well. Dee and Dante led, cutting through lesser vampires as a scythe chews through grain. Pure-blooded vampires were tougher, but still manageable. Where blood magic users among the enemy threatened, Rust, Serana, and Ma Shaoling countered with arcane spells. Akaya Mocha stayed by the more vulnerable members and smashed the hellhounds and lesser beasts that lurked in the tunnels. They pushed deeper. Finally, in a wider chamber, a tall, composed figure stood waiting. Marcus, the one in charge of the operation. His presence chilled the air. "You're vampires helping humans," someone demanded. Anger threaded through the voice when Marcus saw Serana, Akaya Mocha, and Dee among them. "Because of me," Rust called out, breaking the tension with an absurd wave and an overconfident grin. "Because of my great beauty, Serana was charmed into helping me. What's wrong with that?" Chapter 48. The SOS Letter from the Trickster. Shameless. In the tavern, a patron watching the live broadcast muttered as soon as he heard Rust's remark. "That's unscientific. That's not our queen at all," another agreed. "You're wrong. She's always been like this." On the screen, a pale woman in a keongsam glowered at Rust and spat the words like a knife. "I wondered why he hasn't come to the tavern lately. Turns out he's hiding from me." "You're not the only one who's been fooled, Xiao-chan. You should look away." Beside her, a woman in a green dress sipped her drink in silence. When Xiao-chan's words reached her, she answered in a coaxing tone. "Look away? You tell me to look away while you sit there drinking? Sister Xiao-ching." Xiao-chan sniffed. "I knew you two were having an affair." "You're right. I'm a snake demon. I only have one tail, not even a proper leg," Xiao-ching said mildly. "You," Xiao-chan fumed for a moment, then sighed. "Love is a farce to creatures like us. He's an alien too, I hear. A vampire, no less. And he's better than you. You're only an illusory soul." Xiao-ching smiled. "Why aren't you angry? Why should I be? I lose nothing." Xiao-ching shrugged and kept drinking. The conversation drifted into territory that made Jiangju, standing at the bar, uncomfortable. It wasn't that he was eavesdropping on gossip. He was listening because the two women were famous spirits, and anything said in this tavern could be dangerous. "Then why are you here drinking?" Xiao-chan pressed. "My sister doesn't want me anymore." Xiao-ching's voice cracked, suddenly melodramatic. "She left me for a pretty boy." "Sister Sujen? Didn't she promise to repay her debt to you?" Xiao-chan frowned. "Is this the little puppet she mentioned?" "Yes. She says she wants to marry him to repay her debt. What sort of repayment is that?" Xiao-ching shook her head. "The worst part is she claims she fell in love with his looks. What's so special about that pretty boy? I'm not well read. My medicine isn't top-notch. I relied on my sister for everything." "You've been reading too much, Liao Jai," Xiao-chan scoffed. "Last time I saw Sister Sun, she was curled up in a corner reading that collection." "Liao Jai? The story that says you fall for some scholar?" Xiao-ching's tone was curious. "And you sulked with Grandma over a human? Who wrote this nonsense?" Xiao-chen huffed. "Grandma adores me. She rejected a matchmaker demon just because she couldn't meet her in person last time." "That's because you're strong now," Xiao-ching muttered, then added with a sigh, "Would Grandma have been so indulgent if you hadn't wandered into this tavern?" "I wouldn't fall for a human anyway," Xiao-chen lied, unwilling to admit otherwise. "He's only human," Xiao-ching said lightly. "He's different, so strong, nothing like other humans." Xiao-chen's eyes gleamed with infatuation. "You're hopeless," Xiao-ching shook her head. "Just like my sister." After that, they fell quiet, drinking in companionable silence. Jiangju let out a small breath of relief. It wasn't that he approved of their gossip. He was simply glad their chatter hadn't veered into something dangerous. Even he, who had power beyond most, had to respect the existence of beings greater than himself. There were forces in that world capable of erasing whole universes with a thought. He couldn't face such a thing directly. Even to look it in the face would be to invite oblivion. The name that haunted him was unspeakable. Unspeakable. "What's the matter? You look like you've seen a ghost." Xiaohei's voice cut through his reverie. Jiangju shrugged. "Those two were talking about private matters. I overheard. It reminded me, people have been disappearing in the fairy world. They're not just vanishing. They're being killed by someone. A single powerful being can wipe them out. Nobody can stop it," Zhang said, the words flat, as if stating an inconvenient truth. I didn't pay much attention. Xiaohei blinked. Did you put up a notice on the wall? Don't be ridiculous, Jiangju said as he wiped a glass and whistled. Why are you suddenly here? Something happened, didn't it? You don't come by unless you found trouble. I saw a help post online and thought I should tell you. Xiaohei leaned on the bar, frowning. Other people don't seem to be able to see it. It's strange. Maybe it's blocked. Maybe it's on your tab? Me? Do I look like the type to tamper with help requests? Jiangju laughed. I'm not that petty. You're always saying that when you lose at games, Xiaohei said with a dry smile. But this isn't a game, it's the real world. Jiangju's expression turned sour. Those unscrupulous people, when the world's ending, they still have 8 hours to punch the clock. The heating's failing and the coal isn't loaded properly, and they still grumble. They're useless. If they die, good riddance. Is that how you feel? Xiaohei stared, incredulous. When I started gaming, I made every decision carefully. I never used shortcuts. Others used child labor and passed the level without engaging the steam core, while I was the fool who thought about honor. The London gang pushed me out. I was furious. Jiangju's anger ran a touch deeper than the anecdote warranted. If you don't save me, why should I save you? Hey, listen, Xiaohei said, suddenly serious. This isn't a game. Jiangju, we can't treat a distress call like a leaderboard. Even if you don't want to save them for your own sake, you shouldn't let them die if you can prevent it. The help letters got intercepted, Xiaohei continued quietly. It's been more than 10 days. If there's anyone left over there, it must be freezing. It's still 20 degrees below zero out there, Jiangju said offhandedly. Oh, Xiaohei breathed a little easier. So you are keeping an eye on it. I was afraid you'd let them freeze without a second thought. Am I really that kind of person? Jiangju looked at him. I don't know what you knew before, Xiaohei. Maybe you were a demon queen once, or something worse. His tone was teasing, but there was a question in it, too. Xiaohei rolled his eyes. Just don't be cruel. Jiangju finished wiping the counter and tossed the rag aside. Fine, I'm not going to keep intercepting the letters anymore. He gestured toward the notice board with a lazy wave. If anyone wants to save these fools, they can. I've already vented the anger I needed to. It's up to someone else now. He walked out of the tavern, leaving Xiaohei to watch him go. Outside, the night breathed cold and indifferent over a world where traps and rescues, loves and betrayals, and the faintest SOS could mean the difference between life and obliteration. Chapter 49. There are still a lot of good people. When Jiangju released the distress letter from the Ice and Steam age, it detonated across the tavern's network pages. This was the first time the tavern had encountered a natural apocalypse, an end-of-the-world scenario driven by climate and ice, and the posts flooded in from every corner. Many readers assumed it was hopeless. Not hopeless, wrote Fei Niaoxin underneath the letter. Our world made an artificial sun. If they need it, they can buy the ones we produce. An artificial sun can change a planet's environment. Fei Niaoxin had appended a personal note. That artificial sun is very good. When I ran out of energy, I'd go recharge at it. I came back to full strength every time. A moderator who had been arranging relief stopped typing and stared at that comment, speechless. Other replies ranged from practical to bizarre. Requests for food and quilts, proposals to ship coal from other worlds, and even suggestions about whether certain ice weather conditions might be suitable for practicing Bingshan Jue, an old cultivation technique. One message suggested, completely straight-faced, that practicing cultivation could be the solution to an ice age. Those kinds of posts had many people laughing and shaking their heads. These people will come up with anything, Jiangju muttered, watching the virtual screen. He flipped his comic closed and leaned back. Isn't that what it's for? Xiaohei smiled, thinking up solutions. What kind of solutions? Jiangju said dryly. Half of them are fantasies. Those people don't even have money. For now, it's better to send food and quilts. That's true, Xiaohei agreed, scrolling through the feed. But some of them could probably get coal delivered from other worlds to buy a little time. The steam tech in that era might even be useful to our people. It depends on who's willing to trade, Jiangju said, then went back to his comic. Around the tavern, some patrons watched the live feed. Others argued about the ice and steam posts online. The place buzzed with the sort of noisy, distracted concern that always followed an SOS. Out on the frozen world, Sam stared at the tavern's posts on his tablet and felt more discouraged than helped. The city's coal stockpiles were dangerously low, and the workforce had been protesting overtime for days. Important policies he'd tried to implement were being blocked at every turn. Little by little, the pressure had built until tonight he'd snapped. "What can we do?" he'd told Scott that morning. "They're always tired, they complain, they strike. If the steam core fails, what are they going to do then?" "Sams, that's not how a leader talks," Scott said, frowning. "We need solutions, not rants." Sams had apologized later, but the frustration clung to him. When he got home that evening, there finally was a new thread about his world on the tavern site, but the suggestions were either impractical or downright fanciful. He didn't dare trade openly with strangers on the tavern. What if it made the city's situation worse? He sat for a long time looking at the screen, feeling something he hadn't admitted in years: desire. Not purely political ambition, but a personal urge to act, to seize any chance that might save his people. On impulse, he stood up and walked to the place in his house where the old boundary gate had been sealed long ago. In a city where the steam core provided heat and power, people still kept old folkways. Doors that led somewhere else were dangerous to tamper with. Still, Sams couldn't shake the notion that the tavern might be more than a website. His hands trembled. He pushed with his will more than with his strength, and a simple wooden door, plain, unadorned, materialized in front of him. He locked the house behind him, wrapped a thick leather jacket around himself against the cold, and opened it. Inside the tavern, Jiang Ju looked up as the door swung. The stranger who stepped through was bundled against the cold, cheeks wind-burned and eyes wary. "Is there a tavern here?" the man asked in a voice roughened by the wind. "Yes," Jiang Ju said calmly. "This tavern connects to infinite worlds. I'm Jiang Ju, the owner." "Sams," the man answered. "I'm from a frozen world." Jiang Ju waved him over. "Sit, have a drink. You look like you could use some calories." Sams hesitated only a moment before taking the offered seat. He paid for the drink. His world had no conventional currency, but he had brought substitutes the tavern accepted. The concept of an exchange struck him as oddly intimate. To give a thing the tavern recognized was to give it weight. Jiang Ju didn't waste much sympathy on the ice and steam age. He had a complicated attitude toward worlds that caused trouble or expected miracles. But the tavern had always attracted good people too, and they were the ones who noticed Sams next. "Hey, what's happening in your world?" one patron asked as soon as he heard Sam's accent. "Do you need help?" another chimed in. Hearing strangers ask that, simple, earnest, caught Sams off guard. He had spent too long facing crowds that shouted and blamed. Here, for the first time in a while, he felt the warmth of being seen as a person rather than a problem. "Thank you," he heard himself say, voice thick. "Thank you, everyone." He paused, uncertain how to explain. "I know how this tavern works. I brought some of our steam technology. If anyone's interested, we could trade." A dozen faces leaned in. "Steam tech?" someone said. "I'm curious. Add me. How can we reach you?" Sams blinked, emotions so close to the surface that they almost spilled over. He had come expecting indifference or skepticism. Instead, the room filled with people who wanted to help, to connect, to barter with the same humanity he was trying to save. There were still a lot of good people, he thought, and for the first time that week, his anger cooled into something like hope.